I'm Kelly, and I just wanted to share with you a mini workshop on the hip joints and the pelvic floor muscle, and how to have flexibility, strength, stability, and also mobility through the base of our spine. So our body's designed to have this mobility here, and yet it's probably one of the most important muscles for us to strengthen and also become aware of how the energy is moving through our pelvic floor. It gets limited by things like childbirth and age, as well as any kind of traumas we may have had, or even for some of us it can be just a dysfunctional way of moving that we learned somewhere along the way. So the way to come back is to notice, there's a lot here, but I'm just going to give you a few things that we can play with, and then I'm going to guide you through a couple songs of dance and how we bring movement and postural alignment into dance, how they come together, and how we can activate it through the pelvic floor. So let's start with our feet, and if you think of the bottoms of your feet have arches, right? Natural arches that connect through the base of your big toe, so the knuckle of the big toe, the knuckle of the pinky toe, and then the center point of your heel. And you might even have to touch it to just get a visceral feel for where that is. And then if you take a moment and just move, 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 and then stand, just normal. And then do it again. Move, 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 naturally wiggle, and then stand. Let's do it one more time. Move, 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 and stand. Now, without affecting anything, notice where you are in your feet. So whether you're leaning more forward in one foot or the other, if there's a sense of being more on the outside of your feet or you're inside of your feet, you can use a mirror to also give you feedback. But ideally, we start to come more into our body. So we get connected and attuned to getting this information, receptive to this information from our body. It's not judging it, and it's not bringing anything to it at this point. What we're doing is just noticing and taking an inventory that's accurate. So I'm noticing my right foot feels more forward than my left, and I feel that I'm on the outer edge of my right foot a little bit more than my left. So with that, I'm going to look down and see if that information was correct, and I would say just a tiny bit my right foot's a little more forward. So now I'm going to line them up. So if I put a ruler along the edge, very tip of the big toe, I can also look down and see what my toes are doing and look at how far apart the toes are spread and see if I can bring it into equal distance of space between your toes. Takes a little skill. And then I'm going to lean into the ball of the big foot, the ball of the pinky toe, and the center of the heel. And as I do that, I'm feeling something happening all the way up my thighs, and that's what we want to have happen. So we want to feel connected and aligned with our bones here, so then when we're moving, so here's still, I can feel this right hip's a little tighter than the left, there's a little bit of muscles engaging on the right thigh, holding myself in this position. So I'm noticing that, and so that gives me some feedback about what are my habitual tensions and what are my habitual misalignments. With that information, over time, I can reassess every time I come and dance, and I can bring to it the awareness and the knowledge of what I learned, and then start to activate using the awareness and new choices to bring a better alignment as I move over time. And this is how you shift patterns, shift habits in walking. And that's the movement through the hip joints. So from here, now just to get even more connected, if you take your toes and just spread them wide now, put some energy into the tips of your toes, and now I want you to come into the floor, grip, and pull the arches of your feet up. And then let it come down and relax and stretch. And we're going to do that again. Pull in and up. So underneath the bottom, we're doing this repeatedly. Underneath the bottoms of your feet, these arches are meant to not only give you shock absorbing, but they also bring strength into your feet, and that relates all the way up through to your hip joints. Keep going. I was just practicing this with one of the students in class, and he was saying, this is so hard, I have to focus so much. Yes, you do. It's a simple movement, but it's one we often get so enamored by the bigger muscles and the sensations, those bigger muscles, that we forget about some of these minor ones. And yet, from our body, our feet have 7,000 nerve endings each. So the design of our feet and all these little bones of our feet is vital for everything else. Like that might be the most important muscle for you to strengthen versus wanting to build great quads, which are often overworked. So if we think of the function of the body, these muscles, the pelvic floor, the feet, they're functional. They allow you to stay strong. So these overworked muscles, they will wear out. They're not sustainable. But these smaller muscles relate into them. They don't need a ton of weight. They don't need a ton of repetition. What they need is awareness and activation of them to make them stronger. So are you still doing it? Are you still breathing and focusing? This is also an exercise in attention itself. Your ability to sustain and keep doing that while you're listening. You're experiencing the squeeze and the release. And we'll do it one more time. Good. And now just move around a little bit and notice anything new that is coming forth in your awareness. Maybe you feel your toes more. Maybe you feel the bottoms of your feet closer to the ground. So this is going to give you stability so that you can then have mobility through the hips. So let's do another exercise. If you have a ball, these are beautiful to roll on, either using them for your feet. You can also roll on them in areas that are tight, like the piriformis, a little tiny rotator muscle that allows you to do this motion. So if you think of walking, and when we're just normally moving through life, we're reaching for things, we're doing different things, we're getting our shoes on, we're putting our pants on. These are all movements that the hips are designed to do, and we want to have the ability to do that with ease, with nothing overworking. So releasing areas that are too tight allow the areas that are underworked to strengthen. Here's the ball. Place it underneath the arch of one foot. If you need to use a wall, you can do that, and roll it around. So we want to get in between the metatarsals and lean into the tight fascia. I posted a video yesterday about fascia, we dance connective tissue. And I talk about how when connective tissue is too tight, there's this knotted up feel. That's bound up energy that gets, over time, it becomes part of how our body forms itself. It's not healthy tissue. It's not healthy muscle that squeezes and releases and allows communication from one bone to move into the next. It's actually bound up. So as we work into those areas, like I feel one right now, that are almost, they almost hurt a little bit. It's like a deep tissue massage. You lean in, you breathe, and you let that energy move. So then when you move, the movement's more fluid, it's more graceful, it feels better, and you have more energy. These balls you could also put in a couple balls in a sock and roll on them along your spine, up along the neck. So we don't want that energy to be released from the foot and get locked somewhere else. So it's important to be aware of your body as a whole here. And then just change sides. And as you change to the other side, be aware that this other foot could have a whole different experience. Get into those spaces between your toes. You know, this whole area of the pelvic floor and the hip joint is the part of our body that is connected to pleasure. Finding movement is pleasurable. If there's pain, we can always say, how can I make this feel a little bit better? And start to work with how we process, how we think about pain, what our thoughts are there. Can we change our thoughts around it? Can we move just a little bit differently and see if it opens up a little bit of comfort? So maybe pleasure is too big, so we can find, oh, comfort, this feels kind of good. This is where your body gives you validation that your awareness is on it. You're getting feedback. There's a loop that's happening, and there's a specific part of the brain that gets activated when we are paying attention and getting that feedback system to work. This part of the body is also the part of your body that is connected to addiction. And that could be addiction of any kind, whether it's sugar or coffee or alcohol or cigarettes or sugar. I think I already said sugar, right? There's mine working on the sugar thing. But we can also be addicted to pain. We can be addicted to love. We can be addicted to a lot of things where we start to need it to feel okay. And there's this push and pull and grabbing, almost like the little knots in our feet or in other parts of our body. When that happens, when we need something, that other person or that other object, we don't feel okay without it. And all of a sudden we're thrown off being able to give to ourselves what we need that's healthful, that gives our body something nourishing. When it starts to become something we need every day to feel okay, we're dependent on something outside of us versus being able to go through life with a more fluid, with a more ease, with more freedom. And that's what movement gives us, either inside the body or how we move through life with ease. When there's dis-ease, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of highs and lows, there's a lot of feeling like I'm not okay unless I fill this hole up with this. And the only way through that I found is for me to be aware, for me to breathe, for me to find a practice where I reconnect to me and to love inside me and giving myself what I need versus looking outside for it. And that doesn't mean feeding myself the sugar every time. It can mean being with my breath and saying, do I really need that sugar right now? Am I just sort of in compulsion mode where I'm adding sugar all the time and I'm not even going to pay attention, I'm not even going to look at it. And yet there's this whole host of things that too much sugar affect me that I'm also not paying attention to. And my life would be better without it. I would have more health. So it's a process. It's not something that's you're perfect, you're over it, you're done. It's something that I continually work with. Anything that feels sticky, I'm going to work on this one for a while. I'm going to work on that one for a while. And letting my body do it with a level of ease and with some awareness of the emotions underneath, the thinking that's underneath. The moments of the stickiness give me an opportunity to wake up deeper and to feel whatever it is that I feel when I don't have that person, place, substance thing. So there's that whole talk about that, about this part of the body. And do I need it? Do I want it? How do I give it to myself? How do I bring more love in? Is related to the hips. So we've done feet, and now maybe you're feeling a different sensation in your feet. There's a calming sense when our bodies feel that we're supported, which the earth is supporting us, what's underneath us is supporting us. When we viscerally take it in, that I'm supported, our muscles open. And that's what that tennis ball just did for me. It opened my feet, so then I can say, well, my body's even more here. I'm getting more information, and that usually feels good, feels calming. So if you bring yourself down to a sitting position, we're going to do some more movements through our feet that affect our hip joints. And that will bring us into the pelvic floor. So sitting up as tall as you can, I want to show you from a side view. Your sits bones at the base of your pelvis are really, the thigh bone comes into the hip joint, and then the bottom of the pelvis has these two little bones. So when you find those two sit bones, you can even lift the flesh and let one come down, and lift the flesh and let the other one come down. It could be on a pillow or on the floor. Just feel the bone earth or bone cushion connection with the earth underneath that. And from here, check in. So this lower back area is meant to have a little bit of an arch. So your spine, like your feet, has a springy, it can handle the impact of walking, of life. Now sometimes what happens is we become accustomed, and these muscles that connect the inner thigh through the pelvis to behind the belly button, they're called your psoas muscles. Sometimes those can be extra tight, and if those are extra tight, there's an extra arch. There's almost too much arch in the back, and it looks like this, like the butt sticking out a little bit. Also, another common posture from sitting too much is rounding, and then you're sitting on the back of the sit bones, and you're collapsing breath. It's harder to breathe, and there's it's not strong enough here. So it can be overly strong or not strong enough, and we want to be in between so that there's movement, so we can play with movement here. This is really hard for people. Bend your knees a little if you need to, and now we're just going to point the toes and flex the feet. And repeat it. Point the toes, flex the feet. Now as you're sitting in the center of your sit bones, check that you're lengthening up like you're being pulled up by a string. So this posture alone can do so much for you. It can strengthen your spine and allow your bones to actually get stronger here. finding the awareness without it feeling stiff or awkward or like you're military. See if you can find natural, and yet there's a feel that the head is floating. And I'm allowing the head to come up. We're pointing and flexing, working through the toes and those arches. Now circle out. As you circle out, you'll notice the feet are related to the hip joint. So we're holding the pelvis in this neutral position while the feet rotate out and it's fed from the feet, ankle, knees, all the way up into the hip joints that are like two balls that roll in the hip socket. This gets a lot of synovial fluid moving there, which is really healthy. And it also gives you some awareness of what's happening in your hips. If you have pain in one, if there's a little catch in one hip joint, notice that. Don't push through it, do a little less. Just do it less and you might feel something more open up. Maybe one foot turns out a little bit more than the other. Let's reverse it. Open around and flex. Awareness of your muscles of your calves. So as those ankles open up, your movement can have more opening through your hip. Breathing natural here. Sense your sacrum. So if you think of your sacrum, it's 5 fused bones shaped like an arrowhead pointing down. And the tailbone's at the very bottom. So the tailbone and then the pubic bone in the front. This is right here in front where the two halves of your pelvis come together. You can relax your feet now and just loosen them. Loosen your quadricep. You can grab the quadricep and shake it. So the pelvic floor muscles are what's underneath you, and they work hand in hand with the gluteus maximus. And they're underneath and they're behind. So these muscles work together to give the base of your body, from your feet up, the base of your body, a foundation of strength, but also a lot of movement. So the hip joints that are shaped like that ball are designed so the leg can do all of these motions, If we only walked on a treadmill, this is what we would do. So the training of the movement into the muscle is very limited compared to what the design of the joint is for, right? So we can move in all these ways, and that gives us a healthy spine in the lower back area with nothing stuck from fascia that hasn't moved. Now most of us have little areas in that pelvic floor that have, from lack of use, from birth, from trauma, they are not activating as we're walking, and it relates all the way down through how we're stepping through our feet. So how do we waken it back up? Think of the pelvic floor like the flower I posted earlier. So think of it as the energy that moves through it. You know, if we think of our bicep, squeezing and extending, we can do Kegels through the pelvic floor where we're squeezing and then releasing. But a lot of times the Kegels will work at first just to get you maybe connected, but over time there'll be areas in the Kegel, in the pelvic floor muscles, that actually go into hypertonic mode, where they're too tight in one little tiny area, because the energy that moves through the muscles of the pelvic floor is like this. It's not linear, like the arm or the bicep. It's not as linear as that. It's more of a suction and then an open, like the bottom arches of your feet. So we want all these fingers at the bottom of the pelvic floor to all have their ability to come in and also to release out. Any part that's hypertonic is going to create a different kind of movement through, all the way up through the lower back and into the lower abdominals. And then that's going to affect the gracefulness in our walk. It can bring pain in, it can bring in incontinence, and also just a sense of lack of ease in how we're moving, and how we're finding the pleasure of movement in life. So this is related to our breath and into the psoas muscle, which is also called the fear muscle. It's our fight or flight. It's where we tighten when we're afraid. It's a natural drawing back. That we want to have that muscle to be able to have a response when we are in danger, but not to be hypertonic and feeding that into the pelvic floor. We want to feel a sense of we're connected, we're supported, and we want to move because it feels good. And that reflects itself through the pelvic floor and through the tonus, the ability to tone the pelvic floor without gripping and rocking hard and having no ability to move the hips. More than anything in the fitness world, I can say that a lot of times when I see people moving through life and walking, There's a rigidity in the pelvis, almost like a holding in and a holding in of the abdominals, and then there's a walking, and there's not a lot of juiciness. There's not a lot of this feels really good to be in my body. When it feels good to be in your body, you enjoy every step that you take. It feels delicious. Your feet and how you move, especially when music comes on, it's almost automatic that you want to play with rhythms and with a dance that feels liquid. It gives your body this gift of joy and pleasure. So that's a lot of info, right? Let's put it into a song and see how it works when we bring it into choreography. So with your awareness on, take a moment and just walk around your surroundings. And as you're walking, let your arms swing and feel where your feet are touching the floor, and ideally rolling from your heel to your toe, maybe even slowing it down and then speeding it up, so you can feel energetically how this moves through the muscles of your feet, through your legs, all the way up into the pelvic floor. And if you can, sometimes go backwards, forward, sideways, like you're moving in your kitchen, and even begin to notice how you're using what's behind you, glutes, with the pelvic floor. And see if you can just allow it to become a soft movement flow of energy through the glutes, through the pelvic floor, and you're sort of resting into your breath as you walk. Check in, let your eyes look out, so that same posture when we're sitting, we're looking out, we're letting the tailbone root down, so you can sense around the base of the spine, behind the pelvic floor. Let your arms swing so you're not tightening your chest. You're feeling all the feelings that maybe come up. It's all natural and it's all good. Breathing through it, eyes look out. And now play with toes out. So some of us have learned to walk with toes out. And some of us are so maybe toed in that walking like this can help to release some muscle tension in your quadriceps. Most overworked muscle right there. Instead of using the glutes, a lot of us overgrip through those quadriceps to hang on to life. We gotta let go to move. So we're just playing with toes out, with how that feels through the hip joints. And now, take a moment to let your toes go forward, pause, and I'd like you to just scan through and feel what has energy, what has warmth, what has tingling, what is gripping, what's released. Any information. Okay, so now we're going to walk again, this time toes in. So just like some of us are a little more habitual with toe out, some of us are more habitual with toe in, and this might feel really comfortable, and yet this is a rotation, a habitual movement in the hip joint that feeds itself into areas in the pelvic floor that might be too tight. This is definitely something that I feel a little bit of it's too sticky, it feels too comfortable. I want to have more balance and resiliency in my pelvic floor with this position. So maybe for me in my dance, it might be good for me to dance this way a little bit more, releasing some of the inner thigh, the quadricep, and strengthening back here. So pliés are really good for me. Maybe they're good for you. Pliés, where I'm strengthening my glutes, but I'm not being rigid through the pelvic floor. I'm paying attention to how it feels. And then just come forward again. Take a moment to wiggle, 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 stand, and notice what you sense. So let's do a song. Oops. Okay. Take a deep breath in. Let it out. We're going to breathe through the diaphragm of the throat, the diaphragm by the lungs and pelvic floor. Exhale. And again, let's deep breath in. Shoulders. We're going to push off one foot and the other and add a rotation the pelvic floor. Step wide right, and we're shifting into one side and the other. Circle the hip around. Go right into that pelvic floor. Same side again. Look through. Feeling energy moving through your pelvic floor. Hands and hips, direct the energy. All right, reverse the flow. Reverse it. So imagine it's like a ball rolling around a roulette wheel, and you're coming right into the center. Reverse it. Getting bigger and smaller. Smaller, bigger. Jaw is relaxed. We're leaning left to right, pushing off the inner arch. Stir the hips. Now it's the other side, leaning in, pushing off. Stir the hips. We're going to step and snap. And with that snap, feel the picking up of the foot. So we want these hip flexors strong as well as flexible. This is an opportunity to feel that. Drawing it in, lower elbows, everything coming to the navel. And it's like a snap, so it's a little bit of a sharp movement. It's quick. Sense your body, know your emotions. 4 more times. Legs a little wider. All right, let's step forward to the left or that opposite leg, giving it to yourself. Smooth out the breath. Feel the pubic bone. You're drawing a line of your tailbone towards the pubic bone. Suctioning in just a little bit. Last 2. Last 1. All right, one more song. Feet are under your hips. Heel the left heel. Heel. Getting right into the fascia. Load up through the head. Last 2. That weight goes to the heart. Step wide. Now you choose how big you want to expand. All the muscles here engaging length, strength. Should we get the back of the body? All right, steady. We've got the heel. Breathe through it. Release the balls of your feet. Feet into the hip. Last 2. All right, you're opening big. Now let your body get wide, tall. So you're opening your hips. Choose the toe position. Like that plie. Right up through. Last time. All right, freestyle feet. Your awareness is on. You can play with rhythm and notice how's the energy moving through the pelvic floor. Have some fun with it? We've got 2 more. All right, you know what we're going to do? We're going to step wide. One arm, one leg. Measure, placement. Feel the toes. Redirect yourself when you need to. For balance. All right, freestyle feet. Lift the hips. Feel your lower back. Keep loving. Give yourself what you need. All right, you ready? Heel with the opposite side, like a wave. Let it move right up to your face. One more time. Step wide. Let your hands come to your hips. Take a breath in. How'd that feel? Hopefully enlivened you a little bit and gave you some awareness of the buoyancy we want to have in the pelvic floor and how it relates to our feet. I hope you enjoyed this and have a little bit of movement pleasure today. Namaste.